What's up, everyone? Welcome to Simulation. I'm your host, Alan Sakyan. Super excited to be talking about the times are urgent. Let us slow down. We have Dr. Bayo Akomolafe joining us on the show. Hi, Bayo.
Hi, Alan.
Thank you so much for coming on the
Thank
program.
you for inviting me.
I'm so excited and grateful. What a cool coincidence or synchronicity it was that we were finishing up interviewing Charles Eisenstein, and then you walk in the room and he's like, interview Bayo.
Yep.
And here we are literally the next day.
Yes.
Doing the interview. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you were here from Chennai, India.
Yes. Flew in from Chennai to have a talk at the Science and Non-Duality Conference.
Yes.
And now here.
And now here, yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited. For those that don't know, Bayo's background, he is a composer of a new cosmic language for our times. A PhD in clinical psychology from Covenant University in Nigeria. Traveling professor, executive director at the Emergence Network. Author of We Will Tell Our Own Story. And most recently, These Wilds Beyond Our Fences, Letters to My Daughter on Humanity's Search for Home. And you can find all of his links in the bio below, bioakomolafe.net, also emergencenetwork.org, as well as his books links and the Facebook page. So check all those out, everyone. Bayo, we have to start with this. You write on your website, life cannot be computed in terms of ends and purposes. Yet, a conversation that so many of us are having is, what is the teleology, or what is the purpose of creation? Mm-hmm. What is the point of us being here and this being made? So, how do you have that?
Yeah.
How do you feel about
that? Well, the first thing I would say to that is, if I had a response, if I had a ready response or answer to the question of what life is all about, I wouldn't want to know it. I wouldn't want to find out in any final way what the answer is. But here's what I'll say to that. I forget the name now, but there's a people in New South Wales in Australia, and they have a saying, beautiful saying, and it goes like this: that there are 99 senses, not just 5 senses. There are 99 senses, and one of those senses is how do they say it? One of those senses is not making sense of the world. Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. We have all these senses, but one of those senses is just something like a black hole of silence. Like a sacrificial part of the puzzle that will never fill. And I like that. I like the idea that we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. And we're not allowed into that kind of we're not granted that kind of access. So I come from Nigeria, as you have said, and some of our epistemologies invite us to a place of surrender, of noticing that there are some things that we will never be able to language. There are some things that will never be available for cognition. And the world is not just this, and this is a modern impulse to underlie the world, to kind of underline the universe with consciousness, and then build up from there, to say that the deeper we go, the more access we have to fundamental meanings and principles. But the world is not entirely composed of that which is articulable or intelligible. The world is also non-conscious. We are embedded in non-conscious networks. We are fabricated and made by things that do not appear, the invisible as well. So I think the deeper invitation there is an invitation to humility. So to ask the question, what's it all about? That question is maybe ill posed at worst, and the wrong question at best. We will never arrive at a place where we finally get it together. We will practice, experiment, conjure ways of knowing that will give us some kind of stability and direction. And teleology will spring up once in a while, but it will also die, and it'll have to give way to something else. So that life is still emergent, always emerging, and relational, never to be stabilized in one final place. Yeah.
Whoa. You wouldn't want to know the answer to what is the point of creation.
I don't think I would want to. Just like if you gave me a time machine, I wouldn't want to see what. But maybe I want to see how maybe dinosaurs look like or something. But I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to just figure everything out. Like, I feel that's
you wouldn't
want to
go to maybe the end. You wouldn't want to go to the end. You wouldn't want to scrub the video all the way to the end and see what happens to.
I feel something
creation.
really paradoxical might happen if we actually had that power. Like if we had the power to get to the edge of the universe. We're not going to find the answers inscribed in hieroglyphics on the wall of the universe or of the Big Bang. We're going to find maybe ourselves peering back at ourselves. I feel there's a trick, there's a riddle that is part of the DNA, if you will, of reality, that we are constantly composing. And by we, I don't just mean human beings. I mean the vast parliament of voices and beings and agencies, human and non-human, that make up the world.
Yes.
So this is deeply animistic, this is deeply vitalistic, this is deeply neo-materialistic. That the world isn't still. It is composing, even maybe that there isn't such a thing as the world, that is not even an issue of multiple worlds versus one world. It's a fluid, performative universe that is alive, relational, and constantly becoming.
Alive, relational, and constantly becoming.
Yes.
Yes. So then that may be, as we discussed with Charles literally yesterday, the point is that it is alive, relational, and in constant process of becoming.
Yes.
And that could be a point. That could be one of the purposes.
Well, the idea of purpose itself is purpose itself is conceptual. It's a tool, right? It's a strategy. We need the idea of purpose to train our bodies to relate to the universe in certain ways, to take a hold of this complexity and make sense of it. So we need to think in terms of purpose. What I'm trying to say is that the world stretches far beyond purpose. It stretches far beyond instrumentality. It stretches far beyond language, and which tells me that mystery, that if we could get the facts in tow, if we could get all the facts, mystery will still remain. And maybe facts oscillate at the speed of mystery. So there isn't the deeper we look, the more mystery we find. That even facts are mysterious in a sense. So that purpose is still mysterious.
I love how you take us into a world of the aliveness, the relationalness, the becomingness, and I love how you also dive us into understanding with this idea of humility beyond what is beyond our calculations or beyond our senses.
Yeah.
That is also embedded in this creation, and that by having that bit more of humility with that, it makes us feel in ways a little bit more at home, but yet it makes me want to also scientifically probe at that, like, and understand it with hypotheses and try and better understand this creation that we are embedded in. Although, that actually brings up this question about impossible. We like to say nothing is impossible. But maybe there are certain aspects of creation that are impossible for us to understand. That's a hard question for us to be able to just say, what?
Yeah. You're brought to a place where you learn that your tools are not neutral, are not apolitical, and this is being explored in scientific studies and the philosophy of science, basically. Beautiful insights by feminist reiterations of scientific practice that basically tell us that science is not neutral. It's not ahistorical or apolitical. In probing the universe, you are not uncovering things as they really are. You are co-creating and constructing and biasing and slanting things in a way that is available for your observation, so that so that science is not uncovering the world as it is. It's creating, it's constructing, it's deeply political, so to speak.
So we then ascribe the description to creation as we continue to poke and probe at it.
That is the philosophy that comes with empiricism, and that is already entangled with imperial and colonial dynamics. That when I probe the universe, what I'm uncovering is truth, universal, apolitical, works for all people and for all times. This is the foundation of colonial interventionism, basically. That your knowledge is
very applicable to yours.
Yes, I mean, whatever I found should work for you. What Freud found, in Austria should work with people, the Yoruba people in Nigeria. These we're all one. Our bodies are the same. Human beings are the same, regardless of place and culture and context and practice and feeding habits. We are all the same. And this is how modernity. This is the impulse. This is the agitation of modernity, to stabilize things, to name them, index them, categorize them, so that it's easier for us to continue with our world-building practices of stability, of settlement, building settlement.
We do look at something like the molecular composition of water, and we do see it the same no matter where we are on the planet.
Yes,
right. So there is like an absolute truth, like.
But even that is performative. Like the tools that you use are not just neutral arbiters of knowledge. They're not neutral passageways. There are other ways to hold water, for instance, to see water as spiritual. As
spiritual. Okay, so that is what gives me life. It's what gives us food. It's what is part of this beautiful cycle on the planet. It's what I bathe with.
Right.
So you see it that way instead of the molecular composition.
Right. I can use certain tools and diffract, poetically speaking, water into something atomic, something I can quantify it basically, or I can approach water as ancestor, or I can approach, and these are not less business as these are not less serious than thinking of water in the so-called scientific terms. They're just as alive, just as pressing and urgent as looking at a drop of water in a microscope. So they're not less real, they're just as real. And so water is not a thing. It's not, nothing is one thing. Water is multitudinous, it's duplicitous, it's contextual.
Interesting. Okay.
As any other thing is.
Okay. I like your focus on aliveness, relationships, and the becoming of creation. I love that. That seems to be now more and more reoccurring when we ask people about creation. They speak about those concepts, and I love those.
Right.
You have this other really profound thing that you say, which really resonates with me. The way we respond to the crisis is part of the crisis. And that resonates with me because it's very clear that there is some sort of a root aspect to this beautiful creation, that there is a root to what are some of the issues that we have, and potentially purposely here so that we can experience this grand experience of rising up and experiencing these challenges and growing through them, and viewing it as something that who else has ever went to these depths of hell in order for these flowers to so beautifully blossom up, and these leaves and branches to so beautifully blossom up. So in this example, it's that, is it possible that so many of the symptoms that we have in our world are we're trying to go and band-aid and put band-aids on them, and then more bad things spring up from that, versus looking at the initial root cause and the people that we've had on the show to talk about the root cause have been talking about it. It's an issue that we have with that we forgot about our interconnectedness. We took that fall from grace. We forgot about our connection to nature, that we're disconnected from each other. We're disconnected from a sense of belonging. Will you, riff on that point? What do you think is the root of the problem, and how are the ways we respond to the crisis actually part of the crisis?
Well, first of all, let me say that I'm hesitant to even say we're disconnected from nature.
Okay. Yes.
Because to say that is to perpetuate the silent myth that we actually are disconnected from nature. And nature is the green grass outside our homes, the manicured lawns, or the forest, the wilderness. It's a stabilization of nature too. Like, cities are masculine, and the forest and the wilderness is the feminine, and so we're disconnected from it. It's a beautiful story. It works. It's strategic. It helps us think about how distant we are. But I think nature is not just, I think
so. The story works, though. It's actually helpful.
The story is helpful in bringing attention to the deep sickness of modern civilization.
Beautiful. Okay.
But also it has its risks, and one of the risks is that we tend to fetishize nature as the thing beyond, the thing outside there, not noticing how, and this adds to, this will help in my larger response. So when we think of nature as a thing out there, we don't notice that the cameras around us, the chairs, the furniture, this is nature. What you're wearing right now is nature. Donna Haraway would say nature is, who's a biologist and a beautiful writer, would say that nature is a deconstruction of its own self, right?
A deconstruction of its own self.
Like there isn't a thing called nature that is still, that is objectifiable, that is ownable, if you will. And again, I really feel the urge to say this, the invitation to say this. It's stabilizing nature that gives fascism its power, that gives fundamentalism its power. Because if I say that this is what nature is, to progress along these lines of eating the ecosystems around us and the commons, then I can make that claim and go everywhere and try to rule everyone because I found out what nature really is. So it cuts, it's like a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. I'm very hesitant to name nature as one thing, to romanticize nature, even to say that if we return to nature, as if nature isn't a monster too, as if nature wouldn't eat us too. Nature,
which it does in many ways. Earthquakes, fires, hurricanes.
Yes, nature is not this. I don't want to look through pink tinted lenses and say that nature is this beautiful, benevolent thing. Nature resists stabilization. It's like water. Water is not at home with itself. It is fugitive. It's the embodiment of fugitivity, auto-fugitivity, if you will. It's constantly missing itself and reiterating itself, and this fluidity is what I would think of as the site, as the site of nature, so to speak. But we can't work with that, right? We are embodied beings. We will need strategies to meet nature in different ways. And so that's why I say it's probably helpful to think of nature as how that means, we are incarcerated in the city in modern civilization. So
that helps.
It helps.
But I like your so then, if I can get this right, is that when you see creation, the moment that you create a symbol for nature, and that becomes an issue because that creates separation.
Yes, it's even dualism is a strategy, right? I'm not even going to say that dualism is evil. Dualism is strategic. Settlements post Pleistocene needed that strategy to build settlements, and the conditions were available for settling down in a world that was finally ice free, available for the taking, if you will.
Helpful ways for us to understand the
Yes,
world.
yes.
Duality and nature, these are helpful ways
Exactly,
for us to understand.
because immediately we start to build a progress narrative and say we're moving away from dualism. That's already sequential negation, and then that's not dualism there. Noticing that separation is what entanglement does too. is probably helpful for us to embrace it all, embrace the brokenness and the wholeness, the broken wholeness of it all.
The broken wholeness. Embrace the broken wholeness of it all.
I'm just riffing
I
here.
love the riffs, yeah.
But okay. What you say about
the roots,
the roots of all of this is, I wouldn't even categorize it in terms of roots and symptoms.
You wouldn't do that.
I'm hesitant to do that.
Yes.
When I say that the way we respond to the crisis is part of the crisis, I'm looking at I'm desirous of looking at the complex and complicated relationalities between bodies and how these create realities, reinforce realities, sometimes beyond good intentions, sometimes beyond good plans and good manifestos. For instance, we could we don't notice how our technologies influence us. It's not usually part of the conversation. I mean, it was only in the 1970s that posthumanisms started to become popular in the academic world. We started to really pay attention to the philosophy of waste, and then came in the 1990s the crisis of the Anthropocene with Paul Crutzen and Eugene Stormer.
And just in the last 10 years, having these appendages, these devices,
yes,
this is another one of those big ones that we just all of a sudden have now ubiquitously in all of our pockets.
Yeah.
And it's more important now than ever for us to be very vigilant in questioning our relationships with them.
There you go. So this goes beyond language. This is, what are our technologies doing to us? How are we being used by the things that we suppose are the passive recipients of our using? You know, how do phones reshape us? And there's this beautiful artist that I really love. Her name is Patricia Piccinini or something like that, and she's Australian, I believe. And she had this exhibit in Sydney where she had a beautiful, made out of silicone, I think. I may be wrong about all of this, but she had this human-like figure made that is familiar and alien at the same time, because this creature has stretched limbs, a huge head that is perhaps the width of my shoulder, and a sturdy neck or something like that. And basically, this is her vision. Can't remember what she called it, maybe Fred or Tom or something. But her vision is, if we continue to use cars, this is what we might end up looking like in 100 years, because our bodies might need to, by process of natural selection, those of us who are will survive maybe will be the ones who are better embodied to deal with safety issues with cars. So she stretched out the femur of this creature to be able to hold the brakes or something like that. It's just now it's no longer
like the 8-armed person that can type and do cell phone stuff
and thumbs of people. And I read it somewhere, I think was it in a psychology journal, that the thumbs of people these days is becoming flatter or something like that, because we're constantly sliding and all of that.
But then all the transhumanist people you're just talking about would be like, no, we're going to the neural interfaces, and we won't even get to that. But yeah, you laugh. We'll get to that conversation later in the episode. Everyone. Okay,
so my point is we're hyphenated bodies, and this is a deeply this is a metaphysics of relationality helps us see that clearly, that we are hyphenated. Agency is not human. Agency is diffracted and shared. Agency is ecological. So that to say that we want to solve a problem is to assume that humans actually solve problems in some kind of unilateral way, which is not actually the case in my view. I think that we build technologies, and technologies influence us in return and build us in return and shape how we shape the world. So it's like art imitating life, imitating art, imitating life. And then we're caught up in this cycle, this cyclical vortex of bodies that imagine, because imagination is also material, that secretes imagination in a particular way, that secretes responsivity in a particular way, and then we're caught in this way of seeing the world, and we don't know how to see it otherwise, and there you go. The crisis secretes a solution that only reinforces the crisis.
And what would we do about this root? What is the root, and what do we do about it to help us find more belonging and more interconnectedness?
Well, maybe it's not about roots then. Maybe it's about ruptures. Maybe it's about cracks then. If you take the metaphor seriously of us being in a whirlpool and we're just running around each other, maybe the invitation there is to look for cracks, openings, generous discontinuities, radical discontinuities in the fabric of things.
Would we maybe call these some sort of like exit doors out of the matrix?
Beautiful. If you want to go with that. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Exit doors in the matrix. Yes. Okay. That and this is not a human thing also. It's a parliament of things that might the ways that bodies mix with each other might open up a crack somewhere, a topographical shift that might allow us, you know, this is why I say decoloniality is not even human work. It's not human practice. I see deeply in post-human terms and in post-human ways. So decoloniality is not not left to us. It's not unilateral.
Maybe a question then would be: is it maybe an example like a meditation arriving in the West, one of these cracks that created a good amount
it could even be right here in the technologies that we use. It could be that something quite unexpected happens, and the things that we expect to be that we've already categorized as evil, maybe we even say capitalism, or the things we like Facebook, could be the occasion for new kinds of bodies or new kinds of emergent realities. Let me put it this way. There's a beautiful biblical passage in the Bible, of course, biblical passage in the Bible. How tautological. It's about Samson. I don't know if you know any Bible, but it's Samson, the strong man. He's on his way to a place called Timnah. And on the way to Timnah, he encounters a lion. Because he's a strong man, divinely imbued with strength, he tears this lion apart easily, just rips it apart. He's the biblical Hercules, for those who don't know Samson. And then he's on his way. He continues on his path, and on his way back, he finds that there's a hive of bees, a swarm of bees that has infected the carcass of this lion, and they're producing honey. And it's a philosophical moment for Samson. He ponders this and says, you know, out of the bitter, something sweet emerges. Interesting. And I like that metaphor. I like that riddle.
Out of the bitter, something sweet emerges. And so out of in many ways, some of the worst issues and traumas, something sweet will
we don't know. Like I read recently about the Ohio Cancer Research Center or something using the flu to cure cancer, some form of cancer, you know, a sickness to address another sickness. Because bodies are relational, they are constantly potentiated, if you will, with the next. They're not to be stabilized. They constantly are. Bodies are sacred, is what I mean. By sacred, I mean they move. They spill. They spill through the containers that we've placed them in, which means that the things we've already labeled as bad, as evil, and this is not an excuse or justification for them, but it's to notice that the world is much more promiscuous than we give it, than we allow it to be. It doesn't abide faithful to our ideologies, to our manifestos, to our plans. I want to give it space to be as alive as it wants to be. And so the things that the kinds of spaces that my work is about sitting with all of this trouble. Maybe it's what Donna Haraway would call staying with the trouble, staying with the troubling emergence of the world, staying with its flows and movements. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't stable or stabilizing places. It doesn't mean everything is in flux, and there aren't bodies that have reinforced themselves over time. So we can speak of sympoiesis, which is how bodies become with other bodies, and we can speak about autopoiesis, which is how bodies gain independence as well. We want to hold the tensions of that as well. That yes, there are larger patterns that we can speak about. We can speak about the oligarchic dynamics in America right now, and we can speak about how we can respond to that. But we also want to take note.
And plutocratic. Yeah.
And plutocratic, yes. And plutocratic and corporatocracies and all of that. But we also want to take into cognizance the fact that things are not quite still as well. Where is the space to hold the idea that we are in a relational posthuman universe that won't stay still? That is deeply animated and vitalistic. Yes.
There's no even for one day you can't shut the global economy down for one day.
No.
To try and get people to just chill for a day.
No.
Just chill for a day.
No, you're not going to get that.
Please, just chill for a day. The closest we get is like whatever Christmas or something.
Yeah.
And like people are just chilling with their families in their houses.
Yeah.
This,
yeah.
I just want to get closer.
You want to switch off button. You want to press stop.
Press stop, pause. Let's reconsider everything that's going on.
Notice our inclinations to want to stop button might also be instigated by the technologies that we've created that makes it easier, that gives us the luxury of stopping things. So maybe it could be that the way we're addressing wicked problems like climate chaos might also be influenced by the technologies around us, the built environment around us. We want to shut it down. We want to reduce it to carbon emissions. We want to say that is the ingredient, that's the cause. If we can attack this and we've solved the problem. No, I think there are larger issues at work.
Interesting. Although it does to me at times feel like by feeling more interconnected and helping people experience non-separation, unity, that feels like one of the major roots.
I think it's important to hold spaces where we feel our boundaries coming apart, and but it's important to notice that there are larger bodies that have gained resilience over time. You might go for a workshop that might help you feel at one with the world, and then immediately after the workshop is done, you're back in traffic, and you don't feel at one.
100%.
You don't feel at one in that moment.
Maybe you feel a little bit more equanimous. Maybe you feel a little bit more interconnected.
Yeah, but I'm saying even the loss of that feeling is just as entangling. Like it's very difficult to stay with that, because we want to be in a miraculous high all the time. We've been,
life is that.
Yeah, you want to be in that psychedelic high of being at one with the universe, but I don't think I want to be in that state all the time. I don't think I want to.
You want to feel the lows and the despair and the.
How else is entanglement if we're not touching everything at once, if we're not being if we're not becoming with all of that at once, if we're in this place of immurement, this incarceration to positive thinking or positive feelings about entanglement, then we're not entangled. We're fetishized beings, and then utopia takes over, and utopia has a lot of consequences, of course, that we can get into. But the invitation is even the shadows, even the shadows, even the shadowy places, even the cracks are part of this thing that refuses to be whole, refuses to be conceptually coherent for our easy consumption.
Interesting.
How do we see ourselves as part of something that is larger than language, language's capacity to frame? This is the deep invitation of indigenous worlds that I come from. And the moment you're trying to frame it, go ahead, try to frame it. Do it. Try it. It's good. It might work for you but it's risky. It comes with risks. Everything embodied is risky because you move in the world in some particular way. You're excluding other ways of being in the world. I like how one person said, to put on a mask is to be true. There isn't some authentic thing behind, which is why I hesitate to speak about this is the root cause. Now, if we can get to this root cause, then we've come to the world as it truly, really ought to be. That's another framework. That is just as amenable to decay as everything else is.
Gosh, so well synthesized. Yeah. In hearing all of this from you and from Charles yesterday and from more and more of the leaders that we've been most recently speaking to is just so interesting to me, because I've most recently decided that not only just are we interviewing the greatest minds, but we are also synthesizing all of their brilliant wisdoms, right? And we're trying, and now I'm in this process of like, okay, how do we use language and video and animations and fun ways for people to understand the creation that they're embedded in? And it's like, good luck. Like that's but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful journey, but it's also driving me nuts, and
it should. We're about the greatest minds thing. I think you should interview grandmothers you should interview children who probably have nothing to offer to your quest for great wisdom, but
you find the brilliant in some of that.
Even in their so-called stupidity, there is a generosity of knowing and being that wisdom cannot access. I want to be as open to the so-called stupid, to the silent, to the numbness of a table, or to the deadness and muteness of furniture around me. I may not access stuff that I could translate on a YouTube video and say this is wisdom for you to access to build new economies and new educational paradigms. But there's something there. Maybe it's not available to us now, but the world doesn't run on the engine or the lubrication of the wise. It runs on this fluid becomingness between wisdom and stupidity, where stupidity might be wisdom not so far out from now, and what wisdom is, stupidity now. I don't know. It's a beautiful way of saying I don't know.
I love your point. This is very important to identify instances of grandmothers, grandfathers, boys, girls,
the invisible people that don't even make it to contexts like these. That there's a beautiful story of Mandela traveling through. I was told this in Morocco by a friend of mine. He said Mandela was traveling in his convoy and he stops in a village, of course in South Africa, and he encounters a woman. And he says, "Bring me some water," or something like that. And she says, "Who are you?" She says something like, "Who are you?" Like, just dismisses him, and is shocked because he's Mandela, for crying out loud. But she just dismisses, like, "Who are you? I don't care who you are," and puts him in a place that no one puts him in. Just that simple gesture of like, "Who do you think you are?" is powerful medicine.
It is.
It's powerful medicine we need in this time. So also the way we frame wisdom, like it'll come from the people like Bill Gates, or it'll come from PhDs, or it'll come from people who are eloquent. I think we need to listen to the madman. I think we need to listen to the people outside, the people that we've that we've labeled as insane.
Copernicus moments. These 0.1%.
There you go.
Stuff like that.
I think we need to we need to hold space for that too.
Yeah.
Because that's where there's a lot of generosity there.
Totally agreed, and some of that is actually going to end up shifting our Overton window more and more in the direction of progress, of aliveness.
Yes.
I want to talk about this point. This is really important to me. You write about this a lot. You had raising your daughter who's 6, raising your son that's 2, with your wife, and your family interactions that you've been having. This is one of the cores of the newest book, These Wilds Beyond Our Fences.
Yeah.
And one of the cores of the book, and also that I want to know more about what is that like? Because what did you learn growing up in Nigeria? And what are you doing bringing that to your children now? And your children are in Chennai, in India.
Yeah.
So what is that like? And and what does it mean? The letters to my daughter on Humanity's Search for Home. What is this? Humanity's Search for Home, and just another little bit of preface is that we've had several guests that have joined us on the program that were born in Africa and that are doing incredible work, and it's been fascinating to me to learn from them because there is some sort of a different philosophical essence that is that's different than West. It feels so much different. Even being in China just like 3 weeks ago doing interviews there, there's just so much, the essence between humans feels different. What is that feeling? And what are the ethos of your letters to your daughter and the writing? Yeah.
Okay, my first response to that will be to acknowledge that it's just a slight reframing.
Yes.
That it's because I've been doing a lot of traveling. The person that should be credited as raising our kids is EJ, my wife, dear life partner, and she's the one cradling all of us. EJ is her name, and I wouldn't even be here without the sacrifices that she's making. So just want to lay that and respond on that platform.
Yes.
And so I'm grateful for that. Grateful for all the gifts that she's given us as our Mother Earth. And yes, there is about differences. There cross-cultural dynamics and stuff that there is. Anytime I come into the United States, I was telling my brother Charles yesterday that anytime I fly into the country, I feel a sense of it starts from here. There's literally a sense like there's a hanging extra limb that's really heavy from my throat. It's a sense of dread, like I'm entering into the heart of empire, like it's part a response, a fear response. It's a fight or flight thing as well. It's like predatory, like I'm in the face of something really black and deep and I don't know, and primal, and I want to run. I want to run away, but I literally find myself swallowing spit over and over again as the plane lands and as I'm snaking my way up to the point where my passport is stamped. And I think
it's part of your mission to come through.
I don't know. I'm also hesitant to missionize my to say that's my mission or something. One gets heady that way, and I'm very reluctant to do that. But yes, I feel there's a lot of there are things at work here. I've said to a couple of friends of mine in retreats that I lead or talks that I give in the United States that this country, I feel, its greatest problem, not that anyone can speak about things in that scale, or but in some poetic sense, its greatest problem is immigration.
Okay.
But not immigration that you think of right now, not the one that just flashed through your mind.
Okay.
I'm talking about the immigration of temporalities that have been erased, times that have been effaced. I'm talking about the ghosts of times and places and bodies and cultures that subsidize the imperialistic empire building project of this country.
Okay, so are we talking like the indigenous people of the land?
Not just the indigenous
and the
people.
slavery that was imported.
Not just the slavery that was slavery, the wiping out of the massacre of the Indian people, the Native American people here, the transatlantic slave trade, but the ongoing project. This feels like the headquarters of the telluric earth making machine that is about stamping out all sorts of ambiguity about what the world really is. And what the world really is, according to the American machine, is the world ought to be a place that serves profit making, that serves the commons eating machine. It ought to be a place where we progress in this huge progress making machine that is called time, this militaristic epistemology that is clock time. That is all we're supposed to be about. Is we're supposed to be these individuals, citizens in the nations, in the conglomeration of nation states, and we're supposed to get better at nation stating, at stamping down nature's insurgency, probably embodied in climate chaos right now, and then doing our best to transcend and being masters of the world. America seems to be the place where that is most held now as marching orders for human beings across the planet. And so there seems to be, scratching on the walls of empire, the ghosts of times past that are still present, haunting everything that has been repressed. They're spectral immigrants, if you will, hitting on the gates, the pearly gates of empire, saying, we subsidize you, we make you possible. I can speak in terms of it, about it in terms of people might relate with better, in terms of,
This has been incredible so far.
Okay.
People relate with this a lot, and I'm
Okay.
curious what you think about the ethos of a place like China then, or the ethos of a place like Africa then. Those would be follow-ups, if that's how the spirit of the United States
Well, it's basically what I've just said. How we're following Africa, for instance, is following hard on the path that America has, the trail that America has blazed through for years now, for decades now. And China is coming into its own. Nigeria, for instance, is establishing very strong geopolitical, economic relations and ties with China. What's that building construction company that is so iconic in America? I think Julius Berger. I think it's called Julius Berger. It was the construction firm from Germany. It was a construction firm of note in Lagos and in Nigeria since the 1990s, since the 80s. And now it's the CCECC. I think it's a Chinese firm. Building everything, building all our projects. So they're helping us in our path to claim development, to claim our seat at the table. So we're auto-colonizing ourselves now. We're stamping down on our own traditions. We're teaching more English in our classes. Of course, we're holding space for our own tradition, for our own languages in some kind of patronizing move to say we're also learning our languages in schools. Auto-colonization.
Whoa.
We're playing the roles. We've taken the whip and we're whipping ourselves. It's self-flagellation, if you will. And
it's based on just the way that in terms of the economic growth of the planet has favored as the power law, most of it with the United States, let's say most recently.
Yeah.
And then then it's just that, well, now we all need to follow similar paradigms.
We have almost no choice. It's the algorithms of the global development paradigm. It's 1944 Bretton Woods conference in Washington that basically introduced the IMF and the World Bank and made it impossible for Africa to actually, be developed, if you will. The architecture of oppression is in place, is what I'm saying. And there is no climbing to the top of the room. The development paradigm will always have the West on top and Africa following hard behind, chasing, wanting to be part of the game. When Americans speak about the recycling culture, for instance, it's largely unknown to people in the West that most of the waste here that is taken away from our manicured, good plastic bins and just shipped out to a place called Faraway, supposedly recycled, it's actually shipped to places like Ghana. It's actually shipped to Nigeria. Our playgrounds in schools is the dumping site from the West. There's billions of tons where old computer systems are just, and then we take those old computer systems and then we recycle them ourselves to make sense, of our trashland society, if you will.
I believe this is also similar with the way that old boats are parked on the coast of Bangladesh, and they do similar, the process.
Wow. Yeah. So the justice systems in the world, the things we count as justice, the architecture of justice, the architecture of righteousness, the ethics of recycling, the ways that citizenry is conditioned in the West obscures the roles that the nation state has in keeping other people and other nations and other societies under, which is why I'm quite thrilled we're failing at the development game. I'm happy we're failing at it. I think some time ago, Trump wrote about shithole countries or something, with specific reference to my country, Nigeria. Like, that's a shithole country. And as I expected, our leaders were like, no, we're not a shithole country. We're almost like the US. We have good roads and skyscrapers and good electricity. So it was like, we're trying to measure up. It's like phallic measurement. Like we have just as much as you guys. I felt maybe that was the wrong response. And so I wrote a letter to Trump and I called it the surprising nobility of shit. And the idea was to say, we are actually failing at this, but that's actually a surprisingly great place to be. Without romanticizing it, being intimate with our shit might help prepare us for the times that are coming, and I'd rather be closer to the hinterlands than the borderlands. I'd rather be behind the front runner in a race to the cliff edge. I don't want to be at the cliff edge and say I'm a superpower. This is we're witnessing the dissolution of these systems, and I feel that but let me change the topic. The real question was about the feelings. So even resonant in some underground fashion is resilient, if you will, is still a sense of belonging, a sense of community.
This isn't then changing the topic. This is the topic
that
you're just mentioning.
It's a topic.
This is what you wrote about. The surprising. Of surprising nobility of shit, which is the belonging and the interconnectedness.
It's the belonging, it's the interconnectedness. It's the to put it metaphorically, it's the resilience of potholes. It's the metaphysics of potholes. What do I mean by that? Yeah. It's development is smooth roads, right? Potholes is our failure to to maintain that kind of paradigm.
They cause so many issues with automobile tires and alignments, and then we have to go to the automotive dealership. And actually, it's good for the economy then.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I think the potholes is the insurgency of the planet, is the insurgency of our traditions, coming across as our failure to actually maintain these received traditions.
And then we pave over the potholes.
Paving over is success. Is counted as success. I count it as failure. And our failure to pave over those potholes, I count it as a queer kind of success. It's like another world is trying to scratch its way through and insist on being seen. For instance, we had gift cultures. They're still resilient in some ways, but they've been pathologized. There's a shift, right? We had gift cultures. We had ways of sharing with each other. Pre-colonial societies in Africa, in what is now called Nigeria. And, these paradigms came in, and a sense of value that equated self-worth with my individual productivity came in. And then we started to loosen those ties. But those traditions are still resilient in some ways, but they're showing face in form of what the IMF or the World Bank or even the Nigerian state might call corruption today. So a police officer in the airport might ask you for money, as a foreigner coming into Lagos, might ask you for money. That's frowned upon by the nation state. It's frowned upon by every righteous body, institution out there. That's corruption. But what if that's a sort of remembering of the ways we used to share with each other that wasn't so bureaucratic and totalizing? There were ways we always appreciated each other. But now in trying to do that, it's termed corruption. It's corruption. Just like sharing knowledge in a community, but a classroom context comes in, and just to look over your shoulder is cheating. It's now cheating. Yeah. So the framework of our relationships have changed. Mm-hmm. And the more powerful dominating system is this colonial imperializing way of seeing the world. But still, because it's not the work isn't finally done, there's still existing sensitivities that tell us that there are other ways of being alive. Even though we've quite lost the language, the way of relating to that, we know that there are other ways of being alive, and we're itching to find that again.
And those other ways of being alive are those potholes.
The potholes.
Some of those
I sense it as the potholes.
Yeah.
As our failure.
And then also it's these initial principles that in many ways, as we also had, Chris Ryan on the show recently, we were talking on that episode about hunter-gatherers and what hunter-gatherers had as principles, this immediate return hunter-gatherer, where you were just going, taking what you need, and then moving nomadically along.
Right.
And just this idea of just the way to harmonize with nature, to know the plants and the trees and the animals and the relationships in between each other, where there's inclusive fitness. I tell you a story because I care about your well-being and it impacts my well-being and the whole tribe's well-being. Right. Versus now it's I tell a story because I want to get money from you. Transaction.
Yeah. It's I sense a yearning for those kinds of relationship matrices. Again, I sense a wanting to, but I don't think it's going to be a simple return. It's never going to be a return.
Simple return.
Where so deep experimentation is called for now. That maybe should help us, should inspire us to be hesitant about finding easy solutions.
Would it be fair to say that then some of what we were just talking about then are some of the letters to your daughter and some of the ways that you talk to your daughter and your son? And back to that question. I think I call my children the children of the Anthropocene. Yeah. The Anthropocene being this time period when we are all becoming homeless. Even those of us who are well settled,
There's a homelessness and a fugitivity that is spilling through even modern settlements, that is saying you're not quite at home. You have to move very often. The institutions that were your frameworks of reference, they're changing as well. So we're losing trust in the nation state. I think in America, the Congress is not as reputable it is as it once was, you know.
Totally.
So the frameworks are hollowing out. The pillars of that are keeping modern civilization aloft are cracking. And so as they crack, we lose a sense of place. And we gain a sense of liminality, a sense of in-betweenness, as the nomad is always in touch with. So we become fugitive. And I think in fugitive times, in times between stories, we need fugitive epistemologies. So with my children, we are learning to treat them as elders and not just as recipients of education. We're learning to co-parent with them, to affect a sensitivity to things and place, not as commodities to be consumed, but as beings that are alive in their own way. So I teach my daughter to take permission from a plant before plucking it, for instance, or to ask questions like, Dada, where does shit come from? And then we take that as research inquiry. You know, like write it down and we ask questions and we follow where shit comes from or where it goes to. So this is the kind of education that I feel fugitives need. Fugitives from a settlement that is no longer settling.
Whoa. Yeah. Your use of the word fugitive there is so interesting too. It's just this in-between state that it feels like we're in. That was the other word that you used. I must now then ask about this question, which it so seems like everything is in the direction of this. Here we are in Silicon Valley. We recently heard this quote again from Elon Musk. Humanity is a biological bootloader for digital superintelligence.
Okay.
And everyone's like, let's build AI, superintelligence. Yes. That's basically the paradigm that everyone's pushing now around the world. What the fuck is it for? Why are we doing it?
I think we're also trying to escape. It's still the paradigm of escape. Do you know the Tower of Babel story? Have you heard? You know that story? You do? Okay. I don't need to tell it to you.
You may share.
Okay, I can share it. This beautiful, well, it's not beautiful. It's unsettling. It's tragic, but it's also very instructive. After the flood, the post-diluvian society decides, just to be secure, we should build towering structures that escape a possible potential divine tantrum. Let's escape a possible flood. And so they start to build. And
just like let's escape the asteroid collision and let's go to Mars.
There you go. Let's escape. Let's just leave things behind. So if the gods decide, we're tired of the human race, we can just save ourselves in these towers of steel and might and fright, and so as the story goes, all of mankind, as the legend goes, all of mankind is of one language, and the gods notice that they're making progress. Actually, they're actually building these modern day ziggurats, is what they call them, these towers into the heavens. And they look down and they say, let's stop them from doing what they're doing. And how they do that is to sow confusion. They disturb the language, the homogeneity of our communications. And because no one is able to understand the other, the progress stops. I think confusion is a gift. I think it's a gift. And I think that's a beautiful legend that tells us confusion is divine. It's always part of our maturing. It's sacred. I think in some senses, these transhumanist projects of trying to attain some singularity, in some future time, it works by many assemblages. One is the assemblage of temporality, being a linear continuity from past, present to future. That disallows us from seeing how the past is already haunting us right now. So there is no escaping that. That's one agency. The other is that we are actually separate from our technologies. The prophecy of transhumanism is that one day we will gain ascendancy over all things material, that we'll be able to be happy forever. We can tinker with our emotional capacities. We can gain complete and total mastery. That's the myth there, and it works because of this underlying myth that we are actually separate from nature. What if nature is using us? What if nature is already using us in ways that belie and undercut our quests for ascendance and mastery? What if, like Michael Pollan said in his book, The Botany of Desire, I think, what if we're the strategies of apples? Our perspectives are so humanocentric. They're so exclusive to us that we don't notice that we might be the pawns in the game of apples. We might be the pawns in other life forms out there. We're not alone. We've never been alone, and that's something really difficult for modern citizens gestating in cities to understand. We've never been alone, and to suppose we're alone is to perpetuate this. Is to have Elon Musk like dreams of finally escaping to Mars, or finally achieving infinite longevity or infinite life, drinking from the fountain of youth, or something like that.
Let's riff on this just a little bit more. Where let us say that as we spoke about throughout this episode, we're doing this kind of we've been using this now as a metaphor, and I think it's really interesting. This idea of like a boomerang that goes back and then it fetches our initial, we were talking about this like hunter-gatherer, immediate return, interconnectedness, non-separation, unity, source, adoring type relationships, aliveness, becoming, right? All these key words we've been talking about. It boomerangs back, grabs those, and then embeds it in today's world. And then as you embed it in today's world, all of a sudden, it's not to say that, okay, we're going to stop making this, and we're going to stop making indistinguishable virtual realities, and we're going to stop making quantum computers, we're going to stop making space settlements, we're going to stop making super intelligence, we're going to stop biotech and neurotech and longevity. So not necessarily stop those things, but when you do boomerang back and you grab those these main concepts and essentials, and then you bring it to today, it definitely changes the way that we were all talking about those techno-utopian. And so then maybe that is part of this creation, of this becoming, of this aliveness, is our ability to do that boomeranging, bring it back, and then now recalibrate today, and then continue our process of being builders and creators within this creation.
Okay, this I might take a wide berth in,
Please.
just I was saying at the event yesterday, at the conference yesterday that I was attending, that I feel one of the reasons why I grew up noticing that my grandmother had things that looked like tattoos on her arm, like inscriptions. I couldn't read them. I didn't know what they were about. My mother told me it was a thing of beauty. So the Yoruba people in West Africa this facial scarification, just cut marks into their faces, is a dying trend. You would hardly see anyone with that now because we're posh and proper, as the city dictates. We're losing all of that sacrificial epistemology, And I think the reason why we did that was to keep a sense of rupture close, a sense of crisis close. That it's part of Polynesian indigenous traditions too, to throw a man from a tree, a branch, and tie with a rope tied to his ankle, and just toss him off and bring him this close to bashing his head on the ground. And it's in experiencing the intimacy of death that he's allowed to be a full man. It's in Hausa land in Nigeria, where
the base jumping culture.
Yeah, the base jumping, of course. Base jumping is safe
on a
now.
bungee cord safe.
It's safe. Yeah. But is it bungee jumping that it's called? Yeah.
Bungee jumping.
Bungee jumping.
Yeah. Base is, I think, when you go with the wingsuit. Yeah.
Okay, base is different. So bungee jumping is the hurling of oneself. But this is without safety precautions. The way it's done with just a rope. There's no net to catch you under. There's no safety net.
And why do you tell this story? Okay.
I'm getting somewhere. But the Hausa people, for instance, would whip a man. The community would come and whip a man that comes to ask for a bride's hand in marriage. Whip him until he bleeds, and then he's ready to be a man. Or in South Africa, send a young kid out to kill his first lion.
Yeah.
That sense of the intimacy of rupture and crisis, that means you only live fully when you've known a taste of death, is what modernity doesn't know how to handle. Now, when I hear you speak about a boomerang, I hear that and I say, yes, that makes sense. We want to listen and adopt these practices,
but how do they experientially embed them into the spirit of the metropolises? When
okay, yes,
that's
you could frame you could frame it that way.
Okay.
But you could also say that there is a terrifying user friendliness about that. An appification of epistemologies and cosmologies.
Yeah. Like how we boomerang it back and then I put it into an app.
Yes, let's just get let's just get all those hunter-gatherer philosophy. Let's just get all of that
and put it in the metropolis, in the app.
Now it's an Apple app. Yeah. Now it's an app on Google Play. I need to feel at one with the world. Just feel at one with the world app. Just strike that app and you feel at one with the world. The logic of mastery is still this gravitational pull that pulls down. Let me reframe that boomerang hurling metaphor.
And the transhumanist might say something like, you press the button on my phone and then I get the chemoelectroconnectome sensation of interconnectedness. And then it's done and then I feel it and I know it. Okay.
There you go. What if we allow that the people we're hurling boomerangs at are also hurling boomerangs at us?
Okay.
The past, we're not hurling a boomerang into the distant past because the past isn't distant. The past, the ancestors, the things that defy language are also hurling boomerangs at us. We're also being used. We're also being cradled and caught. We're also being scarified, if that's a word. We're also being marked and disabled in ways. This eternal quest for outrageous forms of enablement is the product of the Holocene, is a product of settlements. A sense of being broken is missing. A sense of knowing ourselves only in part, only partially is missing. We're striving to a sense of completion and wholeness, which is the Tower of Babel. Again, we're striving for that, for the summit. But I want a sense in which, I'm not saying I want it. I'm not saying I'm feeling entitled here, but I'm saying I'm desirous of a sense of reaching the summit and realizing that that's the nadir, that's the valley. And it's not just to climb up again, it's to notice that life is not the other of death. Brokenness is not the stranger to wholeness. That partiality or things only coming in traces is just as beautiful as things showing their full faces. And we will never have a full picture. We will never arrive. We will never arrive intact. We're coming down to earth means we will never arrive intact. It's like a libation. As the water falls to the ground, it doesn't land in neat puddles. It scatters here and there. To be at one with the world is to notice that we'll never get it completely. Is to be diffracted. To be at one with the world is to let go of the idea that we can contain, control, master, hurl, gather, use as we want, and still be in a position, a luxurious position of distancing ourselves, from how the world matters. Is to allow for death. Is to notice that transience and dying and surrendering is how things work. Is to let go of the idea that consciousness is the line that cradles everything, is the halo that cradles everything.
And they're such famous, these are great and poetic words, and it's also like, screaming to me, there's like, like Bezos and Zuck and Musk and all these other just ridiculously wealthy billionaires around the planet now that are just listening to those words and saying famous last words. Surrender and death are part of the creation. Famous last words. So basically, you get conquered if you believe in those words.
Yeah, you get conquered.
And so to me, this is like nuts that this is what is.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, my people were conquered. Since the 15th century, they were taken and transported over the Atlantic to new worlds. But there's a deeper story here that I want to share quickly that undermines the absoluteness of power's claim to be absolutely powerful, if that makes sense. Let me put it this way, that yes, we were conquered. Yes, this modern paradigm is said to have defeated a more grounded, natured, down-to-earth way of living. But not quite. That's not the only story that can be told. Chinua Achebe, a very famous Nigerian writer, he wrote the book Things Fall Apart. He said, until the lions tell their own stories, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Yeah. So there's another story to be told about those movements, those forced migrations. And one of those stories that I like to tell is that even in the opening of our bodies, in the cutting of our bodies, as our blood was spilt, it infected the colonizer. The colonizer was undone in the moment of undoing us. So that in unzipping our paradigms, in unzipping all of that, he was infecting himself as well.
Damn.
So this is what might be referred to in quantum terms as quantum indeterminacy, the complementarity of things. That the irony of absolute power is that immediately you establish relationship with that which you claim is inferior to you, you've already opened yourself up to the wound of relationality, and your power is now relational. It's now indeterminate who is powerful and who is not powerful, because those bodies became creolized bodies. They became the creolized bodies in Brazil, in Cuba, in Jamaica. Those bodies undid and undercut the Christian epistemologies that framed God as supreme. Because by bringing those slaves in, they came with their own traditions. They came with their own ways of being. That became hip hop. That became the Washington Monument, as I explained yesterday at the conference. In cutting yourself, and I think any forensics criminologist might tell you this, that in slashing others, in trying to kill others, they look for the self-inflicted wounds that the murderer has. Maybe
this is such an interesting way to put it. It's very relatable. Yeah, that you see the pain that the person felt on their arm as they were committing the So in entering, the colonizer and the colonized entered into Schrodinger's box, and who came out alive is still up for grabs. The jury is still out. This is not to dismiss the painful realities of colonization. It's just to say that that's not the only story. Power is much more intractable, is not as neat and as controllable as we would have it be. Power being not as neat and controllable as we would like it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am very interested in that exact phrase because it does feel like there's this continued desire for this neat and controlled super intelligence that all of the billionaires and soon to be trillion-dollar companies and even more, there's going to be more and more, and the pie's growing, and we're going to conquer celestial bodies. And there's so it's just there's something about it that feels like you described earlier, where creation is also doing the boomerang to us, and not us just going back to the creation boomerang and grabbing it. But
right.
Yeah, that's so cool. Okay, there's two questions that I ask on the very end of the episode. There's plenty more of these that we're going to have to hit in rounds, and conversations are so good. The two questions that we like asking at the very end of the show are, the first question is, do you think we are in a simulation?
No. I don't know. I'm very, again, everyone would have heard me say this over and over again. I think you could drink on or drop, if you were betting on me saying hesitant, then you'll be probably rich by now, watching this video. I'm very hesitant and reluctant to subscribe to the idea that we're simulation, because I think what it does, that kind of reality framing, is, oh my goodness, just another layer away. It's like, in order to distance ourselves from the materiality of matter, we index or we codify this other layer of relationships we call language. And language is supposed to mediate between us and the world. Now, this seems to be an extra layering. Like, it just seems like retreat again. Like, it's not just language, it's simulation, it's ones and zeros. So, in some sense, we are twice removed from the real. We're twice removed from climate change. So, if you want security, and this is probably the logical outcome of contributions like this, if you want to escape, then retreat into the luxurious confines of Silicon Valley. Retreat to ones and zeros, to bits and whatever, and computer simulations and all of that. Retreat to this place we can control and handle. So it's still the logic of mastery again. I don't think anyone could say I found the answer, because like I said, I think reality is how we move through it. There's no external position we can stand on and say this is the world, because in saying this is the world, we're part of the world. To move through the world is to make knowledge in the ways that we move. There's no external point of view. Chinua Achebe again would say, in response to Archimedes, Archimedes said, "Give me a place to stand and I shall move the world." And Chinua Achebe responds, "There is no place to stand. We move with the world at its own pace." So there's no external point of view. I feel this is the another doubling down on biodeterminism. It's another doubling down on the metaphysics of escape, the metaphysics of human exceptionalism. It's layering again, distancing ourselves from. If we can layer again another matrix of control over the planet, then we can secure ourselves in psychologically, economically, politically. We can tell ourselves that we're home, we're safe. So this is home seeking. But I think we need to, simulation as seeking home. Simulation as migratory politics. We're trying.
Our desire to do all of these godlike technologies.
We're seeking home.
Seeking home.
And I don't think and we will build home. We built home in terms of modernity, and I think the time is up. The battery is dead. and we can keep on trying to change the battery, but maybe the insurgency of the invisible is now so strong that the battery is not just a battery. We can't just put it in another battery, which we're trying to do with sustainability, with SDGs and new development goals. I think we're trying to change the energy configuration, but it's still the same logic of mastery, the same home building technique. Now we're without home. And I think finding our home in the homelessness, surrendering to the homelessness, might allow us a deeper kind of intelligence. No, I'm not saying we're going to arrive at some place that will be pure and true for all eternity. I'm saying the mess is what makes the real. And there's no arriving intact.
The tree grows crooked out of the yoke of the planet.
Beautifully stated. Beautifully stated.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. How about the last question? What is most beautiful in this creation?
What is most beautiful in this creation? Oh, this moment. This moment with me and you sitting down with my brother here, in this place, and all the entangling tentacles that made this moment possible, stretching out across space-time. This moment is beautiful. This now that is haunted by ancestors, by non-humans, by cameras, is beautiful.
Again, so poetic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Bayo, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Wow. This has been such an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Wow.
Thank you.
Holy cow. Such an incredible episode. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below on the episode. Let us know what you're thinking on all of the concepts that we talked about. Have more conversation with your friends, families, coworkers, people online about these subjects that we talked about. You can also find these subjects in the links in the bio below. Again, bayoakomolafe.net. Also, emergencenetwork.org. Also, the Amazon book link as well. Check out the books. Also, the Facebook page. Check those links out. Find these topics there as well. Get reading and learning more about them, sharing them as well. And also, support the artists, the entrepreneurs, the spiritual leaders, the organizations around the world that you believe in. Support them and help them grow. If you believe in us, you can find all of our links below. Help us grow as well. And also, go and build the future, everyone. Manifest your dreams into the world. We love you very much. Thank you for tuning in. And we will see you soon. Peace.